Hi, Steve here with my weekly diet update.
Okay, I weigh a little bit less this week, 248, and my fat mass is down to 55.9. That's as low as it's been. My fat percentage is still 23. It's hard for me to get below that.
And I didn't even eat that well this week. I did eat all of my healthy food that was part of my diet, but I just felt like I had no energy this week because I worked a lot of overtime. And some of the guys at work were talking about going to Taco Bell after work and go pound some Taco Bell. And when you say stuff like that, it really makes me want to eat Taco Bell. So one time I skipped the gym and pounded some Taco Bell. Actually, I only got like $2 items. Okay, so this week I will be sharing some of my favorite movies from the 1970s. I was born in 1979, so as a kid, a lot of these movies were playing in the 80s on television as reruns. That could be why I like them so much. I still think they're better than movies from the 90s and the 2000s and beyond, but that's just my nostalgia talking. Okay, so 1971's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory with Gene Wilder. I think a lot of kids of my age like this movie. This was among the favorites of many kids back then. It teaches you that overeating and chewing gum and watching television is worse than stealing. I'm just kidding. The moral of the story is if you're a good person, you'll go places in life. I think it was going with that, but another one from 1971, Duel, directed by Steven Spielberg. This is in my top 5 movies of all time. I love this movie. I love Jaws. Jaws is my favorite movie of all time. Steven Spielberg. You can see a lot of this movie in Jaws. This is Jaws' predecessor. It's about a traveling salesman played by Dennis Weaver, and he's being stalked on the road by a trucker in a big, scary old Peterbilt oil tanker, and it's pretty much just Jaws on the road. There's so much Jaws in this. I love this movie so much. The truck in here just reminds me so much of the shark Jaws. It's just so big and menacing and scary and very mysterious, just like Jaws. You never see the truck driver. I just see so much Jaws in here, and Jaws is my favorite movie. Even the sound effect of the truck's demise in this movie is used in the end of Jaws. When Jaws is sinking, when the shark is sinking at the end of the movie, a little sample audio effect from this movie is used in there. I would like to do a better job at plugging this movie, but I didn't write a script for this video. I never write any scripts. I just pull out a bunch of DVDs and just start babbling about them. But this is a really good movie. I highly recommend it if you've never seen it. If you're into the horror movie genre, nothing gory or obscene in here. It's just a really suspenseful movie. Charlton Heston in The Omega Man. I think this is the second film adaptation of I Am Legend. The first one was with Vincent Price in the 60s. That was called The Last Man on Earth, I believe. This is a really good version of I Am Legend with Charlton Heston. Okay, The Big Boss with Bruce Lee, that was his first one. I guess that was also known as Fist of Fury. Anyway, I love all these movies. They all have pretty similar plots, but they're all really good. A lot of action, a lot of good kung fu, fight choreography and all that. And then here's The Chinese Connection. I guess this one's also known as Fist of Fury. This is one of my favorites. And then Way of the Dragon, the one that is set in Rome. This one is the one where Bruce Lee battles Chuck Norris at the end in the Roman Coliseum. The Game of Death everyone knows of over here in America, directed by Robert Klaus. Used some of the old footage of the old original Game of Death that was never completed. I know this movie gets a lot of hate, and I agree with most of the hate. Like, it's really silly that they have cardboard cutouts of Bruce Lee in here. and they have a stand-in, they have a double to play Bruce Lee through most of this movie. But that doesn't prevent me from liking this movie. I really like the movie. Not only the original footage, which is the best part of the movie, the original footage from the original Game of Death where he's fighting all the bosses up the tower at the end. But I just like the plot of this movie in general, and all of the. I like the story. It's pretty much your typical action movie from the 70s or 80s. And a lot of good martial arts. I'm not gonna knock the stunt doubles or the Bruce Lee stand-ins. They were really good in this, I believe. There are some pretty good fights with the stunt doubles or the Bruce Lee doubles in here. And another thing I really like about this movie is the music is composed by John Barry, who did all of the Bond movies, or most of the Bond movies through the 80s. And man, the music in here is really, really good. And all the boss fights in here, I like all the bosses are pretty unique. All the thugs, all the villains in here, I like Bob Wall is one of them from Enter the Dragon. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is in here. I've always just really liked this movie despite some of its silly editing choices. And then Game of Death 2 came with that collection, which doesn't even really have Bruce Lee in it. They used some unused footage from Enter the Dragon of Bruce Lee in here. But I think they ended up using that in a re-release of Enter the Dragon anyway, so there's no unique Bruce Lee footage in here. And most of the time Bruce Lee's character is just played by a stand-in or a double or a look-alike. So there's always some little excuse not to show his face, like he's wearing a mask or he's wearing glasses, or the light gets kicked out so it's dark so you can't see him. And then Bruce Lee's character, I think his name is Billy Lowe, he ends up dying, so they don't even need to use a Bruce Lee look-alike anymore the second half of this movie, and his brother comes along to avenge him. But I'm telling you, the end of this movie is awesome. I know there's no Bruce Lee in there, but the guy they got to be his brother. He does some really fantastic martial arts work. A lot of really good choreography in here. The end of the movie, he's battling down an upside down tower. It's like he keeps going underground level by level and fighting bosses on every level, and it almost reminds me of a video game. And then the last final boss fight is really epic. It's some of the best stunt work I've ever seen in these movies. Of course, the Bruce Lee ones are better, but man, you got to give this one a try. Game of Death 2. Have to throw my James Bond movies in here. I've talked about these a lot before, so I'm not going to go too deep into them. Diamonds Are Forever, Sean Connery's final official Bond movie. I really love this movie. I know it's among fans' least favorite movie generally, but it's one of my favorites personally. I just love the humor in here. I love Sean Connery being suave and nonchalant. It's just the best thing ever. Okay, here's a movie I really love ever since I've been a little kid. Bedknobs and Broomsticks, a Disney movie. Live action combined with animation, kind of like Mary Poppins. This is a really fun movie. When I was a kid, my grandparents had the Disney Channel. They had cable. We didn't have cable, my grandparents did. They recorded it off of the Disney Channel on a VHS tape. And my sister and I would watch this over and over and over. Bedknobs and Broomsticks. It has Angela Lansbury. It's just such a great movie. It really warms my heart, this movie. Okay, so it's World War II, and Angela Lansbury plays this witch that lives on top of a hill by herself, and she's studying witchcraft so she can create some kind of weapon to fight the Nazis. I know that sounds like a weird, dark movie, but it's a really fun, lighthearted movie. So all of these orphans are being dispersed out to households outside of London. And Angela Lansbury is kind of a recluse, and doesn't really like children. She's a crazy witch that's studying a witchcraft to make a weapon to destroy the Nazis. But she ends up bringing in 3 kids, and they're really bratty little kids that are orphans. And they end up figuring out she's a witch. They don't get along at first. She wants to go meet the guy who wrote the book that she's studying for all these spells she wants to use against the Nazis. I know this sounds ridiculous, but you have to watch this movie. This movie warms my heart. It's about a bunch of people that don't have families that come together at the end, and they're kind of a big family. The guy who wrote the book of witchcraft that Angela Lansbury is seeking out is just a con artist and a shyster, and he just took the spells out of some old book and sold them to get money. So he's always out for himself. And then the kids kind of don't have anywhere to go. They're just tagging along. They want to go back to London, but their family's dead. But then all of these characters come together and work together, go on a big adventure to find these spells for the spells in this book. They have an adventure, goes all the way around the world. They have a teleporting bed they fly on. There's a bunch of fun little silly Disney songs in there. Yeah, they end up going back to London. The professor or the con artist dude even lives in a house that has a undetonated bomb that the Nazis dropped in the front yard, so everyone cleared out the area, but it's a nice big mansion. So this guy lives in there so he can live like a king. Everyone's abandoned, so he lives in this nice old house, this old mansion. And then at the end there's a big battle. She finally finds the spell to create, to control inanimate objects. So she casts a spell on a bunch of old knight armor, and all these knights, these armored knights, they're inanimate armor with no people inside, go and battle against the Nazis. And it's not really dark or violent, it's just really silly. Yeah, anyway, enough about that. Another Disney one, Disney's Robin Hood. All of my friends at school loved this when I was a kid. All the kids love this. I hope all the kids still like this movie. This is a timeless, fun little Robin Hood. There are a lot of Robin Hood movies I like. I like the Errol Flynn one. I even like the Kevin Costner one. And of course the Men in Tights, Mel Brooks' Men in Tights. But I think this is probably my favorite out of the bunch. A lot of funny humor in there. I would love to see this in one of the Kingdom Hearts games. I'm not into those games, but if they put Disney's Robin Hood into a Kingdom Hearts game, I would buy it. Actually, come to mention it, I'd really like to see Bedknobs and Broomsticks in a Kingdom Hearts game. Okay, another Bruce Lee movie is Last Official One. This was an American movie. Man, this is another one of my top 5 movies of all time. I love this movie. I think this is the inspiration for like every martial arts American action movie that came out since. And I think it's the inspiration for most of the big video games I like the fighting martial arts game. I think Street Fighter got a lot from this inspiration. And Mortal Kombat took a lot from this. This is just a really fun movie it's a tournament fighter movie combined with like a James Bond movie. Man, it's just so good. Robert Klaus directs it. He directed Game of Death. And Jim Katza, I don't know if you've ever heard of that. But man, I just really love this movie. There are a lot of great characters. Bruce Lee is in here. I think he plays a guy called Mr. Lee. He pretty much plays himself, but he's kind of like an undercover agent infiltrating this island. Yeah, he's sort of a martial artist, secret agent that's infiltrating this island. The owner of the island puts on a tournament. He's a big drug lord and a prostitution ring and everything, and Bruce Lee is an agent sitting there to get the dirt on him. But man, this is an awesome movie. I love all the characters in here. I love Mr. Han, the villain. He has a claw hand. Of course, Bruce Lee's at his best here. John Saxon is in here too, and he's really good. He kind of reminds me of Ken from Street Fighter or Johnny Cage from Mortal Kombat. And then Jim Kelly's in here too, beating some heads in. I like these three main characters. It kind of follows the story of three characters that Bruce Lee's character, John Saxon's, and Jim Kelly's. Bolo Yang is in here, who later on appeared in Bloodsport. Bob Wall's in here. That classic scene where Bruce Lee jumps on top of Bob Wall. Yeah, I just love this movie. I could go on forever about it. Okay. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This has got to be the scariest horror movie I've ever seen. It's probably one of my favorite horror movies. The whole premise is disgusting, and it's so realistic the way this movie is filmed. It almost feels like a documentary. The characters seem so real, and the environment seems so real. These kids are traveling through Texas. I think they're looking for a property. But anyway, they get lost and stalked by this family of cannibals. And man, this is like a culture shock, witnessing these people in here, the cannibal family. I think they're butchers by trade, and they have killed a lot of animals in their time, and they've become so callous to killing. I think they moved on from killing cows to killing humans and eating them. And man, these people are so disturbing. It's like humans are like animals to them. Like they have no empathy for human life. They're like animals to be eaten. And they'll make little jokes. Oh, this movie is disturbing. And it's so frightening. The little teenagers get picked off one by one. They one of them goes missing, goes to the house, gets whacked over the head by a Leatherface, and then another one goes looking for that one. They get knocked over the head until there's only one or two left. It is just disgusting, this movie. Not really visually disgusting. There isn't really a lot of gore and blood visually on screen. It's just the whole freaking... Oh man. It's just the whole premise of this movie is so disturbing. So I'm sure you've already seen this. If you haven't, please watch it. Live and Let Die. This is another one of my favorite Bond movies. First one with Roger Moore. Love some Live and Let Die. The Man with a Golden Gun. Another one I really love. James Bond movie. Blazing Saddles, directed by Mel Brooks. A great classic comedy from the 70s. I think a lot of kids wouldn't get the humor now, but back then, when you would say bad words or racial slurs back then, it was like really a big deal. Well, I guess it still is, but like this is one of like the first mainstream movies that dealt with racism in a funny way. There's no way this movie could be made now. Yeah, Gene Wilder's in here, Cleavon Little. Trying to think of who else. Oh, Harvey Korman and Madeline Kahn. Yeah, some really funny stuff. The French Connection with Gene Hackman, directed by William Friedkin. This is a really suspenseful, gritty action suspense crime movie. Roy Scheider and Gene Hackman are a couple of cops trying to break up a drug ring. Just a lot of good on-foot chasing action, a lot of good car chases, a really suspenseful movie, really gritty and dirty and realistic. Almost another one that kind of almost feels like a documentary in some spots. Monty Python and the Holy Grail, another great comedy from the 70s, classic. I can't really say much about it. This movie's been talked to death. Okay, Godzilla vs. Megalon. This is probably my favorite Godzilla movie, or one of my favorites. This is probably the first Godzilla movie I'd ever seen. When I was a little kid, one of my uncles bought me the VHS for Christmas or my birthday or something, and I watched that VHS over and over and over. And I understand this is a cheesy movie. A lot of hardcore Godzilla fans don't really care for this. They think it's childish and corny. And it really is, but I've always liked pro wrestling. and monster movies. This combines pro wrestling with monster movies. There's like a tag team match at the end. Godzilla and Jet Jaguar, that Ultraman looking robot dude, versus Gigan and Megalon. And Megalon's this giant beetle monster from underneath the earth. There's a race of people that live underneath the earth that want to get back at the humans on the surface for destroying the earth, so they send up Megalon to destroy the earth. And then here comes Godzilla to save the day. And then there are some silly little human characters in here as always. There's like a scientist and a race car driver, and they have a little kid. I don't know if he's their nephew or their... I don't know who the little kid is, if he's just some little kid that hangs out with them. But they create this robot, Jet Jaguar, that helps Godzilla fight the evil monsters. Another thing I like about this movie is it has a pretty good car chase in here. A pretty good, decent car chase with some good stunt work. There's a motorcycle chasing a car, and really good stunt work, really good car chase for something that's a Godzilla movie. Okay, Jaws. Steven Spielberg's Jaws. My favorite movie of all time. My favorite non-James Bond movie of all time. I can't really say anything about this that hasn't already been said. Just really great special effects for the time. Looked like it was really a chore to make this movie, but it came out perfect. Just all the characters are perfect. The monster is the best movie monster of all time, I believe. Just really gritty, really realistic, but there's still a little bit of humor in there. Just a really fun adventure movie. First half's a scary horror type movie where people are getting picked off by this scary menace in the water. The last half of the movie kind of turns into an adventure on the sea. Read the book to this, enjoyed it. The movie's even better. I'm sorry, Peter Benchley, but the movie is better. I really like the book too. I like a lot of Peter Benchley's books, but I'm sorry, the movie is better. Robert Shaw's in here, plays Quint, the Mad Sea Captain, one of the best movie characters ever. Roy Scheider plays the police chief, Martin Brody, another one of my favorite characters of all time. Richard Dreyfuss, the marine biologist. They butt heads a lot, the college kid and the sea captain. It's a lot of fun dialogue in this movie, a lot of fun banter, a lot of... Yeah, I really like this movie. The Kentucky Fried Movie. This is from the creators of Airplane and The Naked Gun, stuff like that. This is a really funny movie. It's a lot of little short sketches in here. It's a lot of satirical comedy. I really love stuff like that. The feature presentation in here is actually a movie. I think it's called A Fistful of Yen. Yeah, and it's a parody of Enter the Dragon, and I love Enter the Dragon, so when I saw this movie for the first time, and then there was an Enter the Dragon spoof in there, I loved it. Dude, it's so funny. Kind of like how Scary Movie does to Scream and stuff like that these days. Or I guess that's not these days, that's 20 years ago. Just like these spoof satirical movies. But I love movies like that, like Airplane and The Naked Gun. But this one had a spoof of Enter the Dragon in there, like a full movie, and it was hilarious. The Spy Who Loved Me, one of my favorite movies of all time, one of my favorite Bond movies. I recently had the privilege to go see this at the theater. It was a double feature with For Your Eyes Only. Oh man, I was so glad to see this movie at the theater. This has always been one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. They were doing a Roger Moore tribute at some of the AMC theaters, and I was lucky enough to have one of the theaters near my hometown playing it. I actually went and saw that double feature twice. That was like the best time I've ever had at a movie, watching this and For Your Eyes Only. It was a charitable event. Half of the proceeds went to UNICEF, That was Roger Moore's favorite charity. So my wife didn't mind that I wasted money on seeing the movie twice. Man, I could watch this movie over and over at the theater, or even on VHS or DVD. I just love this movie so much. The Deep, directed by Peter Yates, based on the novel by Peter Benchley. I read this novel recently, a couple years ago, and I really enjoyed it. And I've always liked the movie. It's about treasure hunters and some vacationers that are trying to find some old Spanish. They're trying to find an old sunken ship with Spanish gold, Spanish treasures in there. But then they end up finding a ship that had sunk with a bunch of drugs on it, like a bunch of morphine. So they get involved with some criminals. It's a pretty suspenseful movie. The book is really suspenseful. I think I might like the book a little bit better, but the one thing the movie has that the book doesn't is Robert Shaw. He plays the old treasure hunter in here. He reminds me a lot of Quint from Jaws, so I love this movie. It's like having more Quint from Jaws. And then Nick Nolte's in here. And then Lou Gossett Jr. is in here. He plays the villain. I really like Lou Gossett Jr. And then another thing that makes me really like this movie is, once again, John Barry does the music. I just love anything John Barry does. The mood is so eerie and unsettling, and with John Barry music, like, he knows how to make the music sound like it's underwater and scary and claustrophobic and unsettling and eerie. Every soundtrack John Barry has done, I just love it. And then William Friedkin's The Sorcerer. This is another awesome movie from the 70s, really gritty. This is another one that feels like a documentary about a group of thugs. They end up in South America somewhere, and they get a job to transport this nitroglycerin across the jungle to get to a big oil fire, to blow up the oil fire. But they're transporting it on these 2 trucks. And they have to be very careful, like any bump in the road or any little thing would make this nitroglycerin just explode. So there's a lot of suspense in here. Yeah, I really like this movie. Roy Scheider's in here. And of course, Star Wars! How could you not love Star Wars? One of the greatest science fiction fantasy movies ever made! Yeah, Star Wars. 1977. I wish I would have been old enough to, or I wasn't even born yet, but I wish I would have been born back then to go see this at the theater. That would have been a great year to go see movies. This, The Spy Who Loved Me, and The Sorcerer. It's kind of overlooked, but love the special effects. They still hold up. This version here has the original theatrical version, and then the new remastered special edition BS. And I guess that one looks pretty good too. I don't want to knock all the work they did on the special edition, but man, the original just holds up so well. Yeah, I just love all these characters. Love Vader and Peter Cushing in there, the villains, and the young kid looking for adventure, the space pirate and his dog companion, the feisty princess, the gay robots. Roger Corman presents Piranha, directed by Joe Dante. I've always really, really loved this movie. It came out after the Jaws craze, or during the Jaws craze. It's another one of the Jaws ripoffs, but I think it's a lot more than that. It's really unique. Sort of similar plot to Jaws, but it's with some man-eating piranhas that get released into some American rivers. I always found this movie really disturbing and scary. I know people say, oh, it's funny, it has a lot of humor in it. I don't really find much of it funny. I think it's really disturbing, these piranhas in the river eating up people. I don't really see much humor, but the suspense is there. I really love this movie. And then there is some comedy, but yeah, there's good chemistry and some good funny moments between the 2 leads in this. The male is a hermit that lives up in the mountains, and he's a drunk. And then the female is a private investigator looking for some missing kids that got chewed up by piranhas. But when those two get together, it's pretty funny. They have some really legitimate funny scenes in there. Some really fun dialogue between them. Yeah, but other than that, this movie's really disturbing. I never liked the part when the kids are getting eaten up by the piranha. None of them die, but just the idea of the little kids at the summer camp getting eaten up by the piranhas, I've never liked that scene at all. And now that I have two little girls, I probably really don't want to watch this movie. That scene always disturbed me. Like, none of the kids died, they just got little bites on them. Anytime an adult got in the water, they'd be shredded up in seconds, but the little kids were in there for like 5 minutes and they just got a little scratch at the most. But yeah, that movie, this is hard to watch. It was hard for me to watch it before I had kids, and now I probably couldn't even watch this. So I don't really see what's funny about that. It made for good suspense. I thought this movie was really suspenseful, especially as a kid, and I've always really liked this movie. And then I watched the movie with Joe Dante's commentary, and he kind of ruined it for me because he was talking all this crap about it and all the mistakes he made and how he was ashamed of it and all this. So it kind of turned me off to the movie because I always liked it. I thought it was good. Yeah, so Joe Dante's commentary, pointing out all of his little mistakes and stuff, kind of made me like the movie less. I wish I wouldn't have watched it because I always really liked this movie, and I still do. But Jaws 2, I think this is one of the best sequels ever made. It's a really good follow-up to the first movie. Of course, nothing will ever top Jaws 1, but I think this is at least half the movie that Jaws 1 is. Roy Scheider is back and he's good as ever. Murray Hamilton, the guy that plays the mayor, he's back, he's good as ever. The Weasley real estate guy is, I forget his name, Glenn Peterson. I forget the actor that played him. I really like that character too. This movie's more like a slasher horror movie. There are a bunch of kids sailing. I guess that's what kids do on Amity Island. They go out sailing. Like back in the 70s or the 50s or the 60s, kids would cruise around in cars that didn't live by the ocean. I guess these kids would just go cruise out on little sailboats all day long. It looked like a lot of fun. So all the teenagers were out sailing and they were attacked by this shark. It must be a descendant of the shark from Jaws 1. It's a big, huge shark. No other great white in the ocean is as big as this thing. But man, it is a menacing force. It takes out a helicopter. It takes out a boat or two. It's just like an unstoppable wrecking machine. And I always thought this movie was really suspenseful too. I really was scared for the kids. A lot of times in movies, the teenagers, I find them annoying. But in this one, for the most part, they were all pretty likable characters. And then the chief's son, he's like 6 or 8 years old. He sneaks out with his big brother, goes sailing. So there's a little kid stuck out there too with this big shark. It kind of shows Chief Brody at his lowest point. Like, he kind of becomes an alcoholic and he's obsessed with the idea of this shark and no one believes him and he gets fired. And they always come up with such creative ways to kill the shark at the end of these movies. I just really love these movies. This is not Steven Spielberg, it's a Gino Schwark. I can't pronounce his name right, but man, I really love his directing in this movie. It almost feels like Steven Spielberg directed it. And then John Williams did the music again, so yeah, this is just a top-notch horror movie from the 70s. Here's one I've always loved, Hardware Wars. This is a parody of Star Wars. It's like a really low-budget parody of Star Wars, but it's really funny. Like, all of the spaceships are made out of like kitchen hardware on strings. It's super funny. And then all of the characters have silly names like Obi-Wan Kenobi is Augie Ben Doggy, the Red-Eyed Knight. And then there's Chowchilla, the Cookie Monster. He's like the Chewbacca. but he looks like the Cookie Monster. This movie is hilarious. I actually have this copy signed by the director, Ernie Facilius. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. Ernie Facilius. This guy is funny. I love his sense of humor. If you watch the director's commentary on this, it'll crack you up even more than the movie. So if you haven't seen Hardware Wars, I recommend it. A great Star Wars parody. Here's The Warriors from 1978. Yeah, this is a great action adventure movie from the 1970s. It has this gang of thugs is trying to travel across New York on foot and train or subway to get back to Coney Island, and all the other gangs in New York are stalking him, and they all have really silly themes. All these gangs, it kind of reminds me of roller derby or pro wrestling. I don't know if gangs had weird themes like that in real life back then, but on the movie it's hilarious. And all the gangs are out to get this gang they're called the Warriors. They're trying to get back to New York. Not all of, or they're trying to get back to Coney Island. Not all of them make it. But man, this is a fun action movie. A little bit of romance. Yeah, I really like the music in this one too. And then here is Dawn of the Dead, the original George A. Romero version. My copy has 3 different versions. It has the US theatrical release, the extended version, and the European version. I think that one's edited by Dario Argento. I love every version of this. I can't tell you which one I like the most. This is just one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Yeah, I was really hoping George A. Romero would make some more movies. He just passed away. Yeah, I pretty much liked everything he made, especially this one. This is my favorite George A. Romero zombie movie. Everything on all of these new zombie shows and movies like Walking Dead owe everything to this movie and its predecessor, Night of the Living Dead. I just love zombie movies and the zombie genre so much because of this movie. And it got me into Resident Evil over here. Yeah, I just love this so much. And then I sought out zombie movies after this. Like any little cheesy Italian zombie movie I found, or any American-made zombie movie from the 70s or 80s, I would go look for them and try to watch them no matter how low budget or crappy they were. Sometimes I'd find some really good gems. But man, yeah, this made me obsessed with zombie movies. And now because of Walking Dead, I'm burned out on zombies. Like everything I was always looking for in a zombie movie up on the shelves at the video store, it never quite did what this movie did. But then Walking Dead comes out, and it was kind of what I've always wanted. It still is nowhere near as good as this to me, but now there have just been so many seasons of Walking Dead, I'm just burned out on it, and I don't even seek out zombie movies anymore. But yeah, Dawn of the Dead, if you haven't seen it, this is the original shopping mall zombie movie. Okay, Disney's The Black Hole, sci-fi movie from the late 70s. It's kind of a weird science fiction movie. Kind of reminds me of something like 20,000 Leagues Below the Sea, something like that. Is that the one with Captain Nemo? It's something like that, or Forbidden Planet, sort of that type of thing. A madman has been researching a black hole, and a ship full of astronauts find him, and then the plot unfolds. It isn't really one of my favorite movies. There's a lot of stuff I like in here. Robert Forster's in here, Ernest Borgnine, I think Anthony Perkins, and there are a lot of little silly robots in here. This is a Disney movie, so it kind of feels like a kid's movie, but then some parts it really is dark. It feels like a mature science fiction movie. So I guess I enjoy this movie, but again, what I really like about this is the score by John Barry. John Barry composed the music for this. Anything with John Barry makes it better. Like, you could put a John Barry score to Manos Hands of Fate, and Manos Hands of Fate would be awesome. I just something I really like about John Barry's music. Yeah, just the John Barry music, especially in stuff like this, it's so eerie and unsettling and beautiful at the same time. Yeah, but this movie had pretty good special effects for the time. I'm not knocking it. And then 1979, once again the year I was born, Moonraker. Probably one of my favorite movies of all time. One of my favorite Bond movies, if not my favorite. I know this is another one that doesn't get much praise among Bond fans or anyone. I just feel like this is like one of the best epic adventure sci-fi action movies ever made. It's just the production value is just off the scale. It's like taking Bond to outer space. The first half of this movie is like everything I like about James Bond, and then the second half is like a sci-fi movie with James Bond in it. It's just so epic. Anyway, that's about it for this week. I just wanted to share my favorite movies of the 70s. I'm sure there's some I left out or forgot about. I just rummaged through my collection really quick here to find these. But anyway, I'm always looking for old movies from that era to watch. So let me know what some of your favorites are. Watching an old movie I've never seen is sometimes like watching a new movie, and I don't have to spend $8 on a ticket. I could probably find it for free on YouTube or go down to the music store and get it for $1 on DVD. So anyway, those are my favorite movies of the 70s, and let me know what yours are, please, because I'd like to know about some more. I know I've left some out. But anyway, this era was like when movies were getting really good. I feel like 60s, 70s, 80s is where movies peaked for me. Anyway, well, I'll see you next week with my diet update. Bye.